Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I should say good morning if you're in Bangalore, India, and you're watching this. Thank you for tuning in to Social Confoes. It's a brand new edition, and we're getting close to those 50 episodes, Diego.
Yeah, the goal we set up at the beginning of the year is starting to shape up. We're seeing the end and the start of a new beginning, hopefully.
Yeah, and I think we have a perfect guest to kind of kickstart into ideas and concepts that we're going to do next year. So, are you ready to introduce our guest for today?
More than ready. I've actually been looking forward to engaging more with people I met during the fellowship, the on deck fellowship in the beginning of the year, and I'm so glad that Saswat reached out because sometimes you need to have a proactive approach, and I've been kind of slacking. And Saswat has always been a person who's been asking curious questions in the live sessions, so it's kind of encouraging for me personally to have that engagement. And Saswat also has his own podcast. He'll talk to us more about it as we go through the episode. But he's the host of the SaaS podcast, and I always found it funny how he named it because it sounds like his name, but SaaS as in software as a service. He'll tell us the story behind that a bit. But he's the host of the SaaS podcast, and he's actually interviewed quite a few interesting, noteworthy individuals, podcasters as well. One notably, most recent was, I think, Andrew Warner. And if you don't know Andrew Warner, he's huge in the podcast space in Silicon Valley. I think over 10, 15 years of podcasting experience with, I think, 1,500 episodes. So I haven't finished the full episode yet, but I'm really excited to, learn more about what Saswat, especially
1,500 episodes.
has learned from something like
Whew.
that and how he has implemented it, because he also guides other thought leaders in how to channel that through a podcast. So I'm not going to tell anymore, but without further ado, Saswat, welcome to Social Convos.
Hey, Diego. Hey, Diego. Hey, John Luke. It's an absolute pleasure and privilege to be on your show, guys, and especially Diego, because we have already been through a common fellowship. So I absolutely adored some of the work that you have been doing. So thank you so much for inviting me in.
No,
Awesome,
thank
man.
you for being here. We always appreciate when we have conversations with people from all around the world. And for those of you who are just tuning in, Satwat is based in Bangalore, India, and it's like 5:30 a.m. in the morning. So how we intro every time, good morning, it actually applies for him. So it's really cool to
Finally, we
talk to
have yeah. So
someone.
we have to start off, Sas, but we do have to start off with like we have like a big brain drain in Suriname. Like a lot of
Mhm.
people once they graduate high school, they have the if they have the luxury or they find a grant or find a way to actually study abroad. A lot of people go and study abroad and they don't actually come back. So I'm wondering, especially India, you're much bigger as a country than we are. We're probably, compared to India, we're not even considered a city. So what is it? What is it there? Like how does a normal trajectory of somebody who's from Bangalore? What is the kind of the business trajectory or the professional trajectory that you kind of go through from growing up to going into business?
Sure. I think well, that's a deep question. So let me deconstruct that into two parts. One is that my personal journey, and secondly, what I have been seeing around me, my friends, some of my close, college mates, and in general, in the society, what people have been doing for the last few
Awesome,
years.
awesome.
So personally, of course, I'm a electronics and communication engineer by profession, and thereafter I did my MBA in international business, and I just got into the management consulting bandwagon. So started with a bunch of stints out here in this part of the world, APAC, and thereafter moved to UK. Lived there for a couple of years, did some bunch of consulting engagements as well. And then, yeah, like management consulting, it really pitches you to different geographies and locations. So was lucky enough to travel the world, had been to Middle East, spent some time over there. Then again, changed some jobs, went to the US, then, did some stints in the, East Coast, came back to India, then just thought, okay, few years of consulting experience, corporate experience. Is there a way you can actually dabble your hands in the startup ecosystem as well, because really it was rising out here. So yeah, that led me to go to Israel, lived there for a while, then again went to US to pitch to some of the investors, came back, dabbled a little bit in the SaaS ecosystem, and eventually just before the pandemic, I was in Latin America as well, very close to you guys, in Mexico. I was teaching entrepreneurship and venture capital in a university called as IGADI Business School as a guest faculty. And thereafter, in 2020 and 2021, yes, I was very big on podcasting. So that's my normal trajectory. But typically, a lot of my friends and colleagues and work friends of my age range usually go for a traditional, how do you say, a scientific degree. Usually, either they choose engineering or medicine. That has been the normal career choice
Very
for a
Asian
lot of
traditional.
typical, especially because a there is a little bit of societal pressure around them, because their parents, their family members really enforce the fact that they have to be in the top notch universities to actually, India is a very competitive market, right? So irrespective of which stream you choose, if you want to really excel, then you'll have to be very competitive early on from your school days itself. So that really translates into getting into engineering or medicine. And after that undergraduation degree, a lot of people really understand what to do next. So that's like many of the folks go for higher education in many universities across the world. A majority of the segment from the engineering curriculum, they usually choose to go to US and to pursue their higher studies. And that's why you see a lot of people in the US ecosystem, doing really good in the big tech space, who are really coming from India. And if they just stick on to that particular space for like 5-10 years, then they really go to the upper echelons of those companies as well. So that's
A lot of, sorry to interrupt you, but a lot of CEOs from Fortune 500 companies it's a very interesting trend that's indeed going on. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the recent one was Parag from Twitter, has an Indian origin as
Yeah.
well, and
Oh yeah,
we
Jack
have been
Dorsey
to.
stepped down.
Yeah, so we have been like tweeting all our what, like 5-6 years. So everyone is on Twitter, especially the people like podcasters. We all are on Twitter as well, and that was a big news for the Indian diaspora as well.
How does that translate back to India though? Because Jean-Luc mentioned brain drain because the people go out to further, their interests, especially in the tech space. Because from our perspective here, I don't know if that's the same impression in other places, but a few years back, India was perceived as, the outsourcing of cheap tech support and IT labor. Is that still kind of the stereotype, or has the tech space in India itself developed to a more mature state, in your opinion?
Right. I think it's been almost like 20 years that I've seen very closely. Just after my 10, 12th, I realized that brain drain was a very common phenomenon back in the day of like 2001 to 2005 or 7, maybe, right? So that was like the peak era where a lot of professionals from India were actually going, just not engineering professionals or, top-notch management graduates, but also people from the medicine professions as well. They were traveling to Australia, Canada, UK, or obviously the US. But for the last 10 years, especially when the startup ecosystem has a little bit matured in India, what I've seen is that India is now becoming a hub for a lot of product companies as well. some of the, I mean, I really am on long on this space called as software as a service. So a lot of SaaS companies are also coming out from India, and we are currently in the golden era of this particular SaaS revolution that's currently taking off. But if I were to summarize for you, Diego, strongly believe that for the last 11 to 12 years, there has been a less of brain drain. There has been a reverse brain drain, to be honest. A lot of people who were in other countries like US and other parts of the world, they have actually come back to the hubs like Bombay or Delhi or Bangalore, and they've started something from these hubs as well, along with their friends and families.
And to quickly touch on that point, since someone already asked this, what's SaaS? So SaaS is software as a service, as that's the meaning, the terminology. But could you break it down in how a layman should understand what SaaS is, and why do you say it's in like the golden era right now that people should look more into SaaS?
Sure. I take a dig on my name every other time when I actually talk about it, because the SaaS itself is there in my name, right? So software as a service is not a new tech stack. It's actually a business model. So like any business model, if you have a little bit of subscription layer on top of it, if there is a lot of licensing around it where you can actually sell the software to anyone from any part of the world, then that is the software as a service business model, right? You are actually lending out a particular piece of software for a particular dollar value, let's say $5, $10, $1,000, whatsoever, for a definitive amount of time to all your customers. So that's one of the easiest digital business model, and it's very well known these days because all the softwares that we folks are using, right? Whether it is
Basically, what we're
Zoom.
using right now, StreamYard, is a SaaS product.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because whosoever has bought it, let's say John Luke or Diego, then you'd have actually paid a particular dollar value per month for 12 months, and keep going on around it, right? So anything that you subscribe for a few months and then thereafter you, so if I were to deconstruct what software as a service has been, it is like changing it from the previous on-premise software era to the current on-cloud era.
Okay, I'm just we're just gonna deep dive just because there are some interesting questions coming in. So Gregory comes with a very peculiar question,
Mhm.
which is, how do smart people deal with really smart people? A lot of people are number one in lower education, but when it comes to higher education, the entire class is filled with number ones. I'm not sure, Gregory, if you want to frame the question further. I think it's a very valid point. I would love to have Saswat go first, and then Diego and I can maybe touch upon it a little bit from our experience as well.
Yeah, sure. My 2 cents would be the more higher you go up the value chain, if you were to tell that as, usually you will always find smart people, right? Because they have excelled in the field that they have chosen, and they are finally going up the value chain because of their expertise, knowledge, and the experience that they have gathered over a few years. Now, the way to deal with, I'll quote something called as the riches are in the niches. So, if you are really trying to make your mark in that space, then you'll have to find your own niche. So, if you know exactly that this is what I will be doing for the next few years, then you will just not go on the breadth side of it, but you'll really go deep into a particular area or aspect. Now, Malcolm Gladwell always talks about this 10,000 rule, right? So if you have actually devoted certain amount of time for a particular area or subject, then you already have developed that expertise, and you can direct or channelize that expertise to really excel in your particular field as well. But having said that, you should always feel that you do not have to be very competitive with all the smart people who are at the top of the chain, right? It's a very collaborative effort. The more higher you go, the more humble you become. So once you are humble down, what you can do is that you can actually collaborate with a lot of other smart people as well, try to see where the best synergies lie, and try to co-create something better for the world. So that is one way of approaching when you are in that particular space. But having said that, everyone is a smart person. It's just that they are smart in their respective field.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
awesome answer. Yeah, go ahead, Diego.
no,
Yeah,
I loved how you mentioned, you become humbler as you go higher up in that chain, because I agree with that sentiment. As you learn more about the particular niche or, a particular subject, the more you realize how much you don't know, and that you actually need the different niches to complement your knowledge to actually co-create, as you said, something new. And even finding a niche is can be particularly hard. And I would add to this, you don't have to stick to one niche. You don't have to stick to one particular subject. And I think Tim Ferriss broke it down very nice. Become a specialized generalist by combining two or multiple niches into, an overlapping field to create a uber niche that kind of bridges the gap between those two. And I
Love
think
it.
that's a way you could approach it as well if you think about it, how you co-create or collaborate with the other smart people in the space you're in. And I know Gregory's background a bit. He's in the finance space, trying to get into the a CFA program, and that's very
it's
very
funny.
hard.
It's funny.
He told me about it.
So
So I think that's where the sentiment comes from a
yeah.
bit.
So quickly putting into a little bit more frame. Is there a reality check for smart people? Do people start to become resentful or jealous of other smart people? And I think the traditional thought is that Gregory's from a space that is a dog eat dog world, and I'm laughing because outside right now two dogs are fighting at the moment. But so, but for me, when I look at it, like I don't think it's also just the smarts. I think it's very how self-reflective are you, and how quickly are you aware that you're in a group where you're not the smartest person in that group, and
Mhm.
in a group where there are actually other people that are more knowledgeable than you are, and how do you approach it, and how do you go about it? Because I know quite some smart people that they they can't place themselves among others, and then they become resentful indeed, or they try to be like they really try to be a leader of the group. It doesn't come natural because there are other people that are like, yeah, but what you're saying and what you're doing, we've been there before, and that's kind of the I rarely have issues with people that are smarter than me.
Mhm.
Um, because I often realize quickly that people are smarter than me. And I think for a lot of smart people, when they realize that others are smart as well, they try to learn from them. So that's why
Yep.
the answer is beautiful. Like as Saswat said, like it's more of a collaborative effort. It's more than a collaborative effort because you know you need each other. You know you don't have all the expertise, so you reach out to others. The only moment that it becomes kind of an issue when there is somebody who might have a high IQ but has a lesser EQ and is just trying to be the boss of everybody else or trying to do it their way without actually consulting the others. Because if you consult others first, like I have this idea, what do you think? And you're open
Mm.
minded to have your idea changed, there's almost never like a collusion of thoughts. But once you
Mm.
have like somebody that's like my brain, my way of thinking, and my thoughts are leading, and they are better than others. That's
Mm.
basically when the kind of the disconnect comes. And I think in the field of finance, there might be, especially traditional finance, there might be a lot of people that still think in a way like I know it best, so you have to listen to me. Whereas I think also our generation is kind of like, yeah, sure, but we really don't know everything at the moment, and there's abundance of information. Why do you want to claim information when there's abundance? So expect each other, accept each other's expertise. I think that helps a lot.
Yeah, I think John, look, you really touched upon two words that really stuck on me. Is one is that you said about leading, which is like talking about a different, ball game. Leadership is a different game altogether. and not necessarily all smart people are good leaders, and some cases not all good leaders are extremely smart as well. So it's, and the second part is that do you actually have to lead if you are really top of, if you are really a smartest person as well, right? So first of all, these are two different angles. Like one is that leadership is just not about being smart. That's the quality aspect of it. You have a depth of knowledge, you have the breadth of a knowledge, and you are exploring in the leadership is like being smart, being knowledgeable, plus having excellent communication skills as well. The way you communicate with all stakeholders, the way you communicate with people, etc. So that's the leadership angle. But smart people, if you were to reference, a lot of them are introverts as well. So I was there in another pod of our friend who runs a podcast by the name of Digital Introverts, Godwin. And something that we learned is that the way an introvert or an extrovert approach to these areas, right, are very complex and very different as well, right? So leadership, I would not say has a lot of. If leadership is 100%, I would say being smart just gives 5% into that bigger pie, right? The rest 95%, there's a lot of things that are coming in, right? There's communication skills. There is the way how you interact with a lot of people, the way you actually trust your instincts, etc., etc. So you could be smart, but leading is a different ball game altogether.
Okay. I quickly want to jump into the leading part before we really dive into more the podcasting space, because I do want to have a little bit of that brand mindset, because you might not know it, but there are some similarities in the way you spoke on the developments of people from India going abroad, building up experience abroad, and coming back. And we have kind of a very a lot of about 50%, a little under 50% of Suriname has a very strong Indian heritage. So there are some connections to it as well. So what really strikes me as interesting is you mentioned that also due a little bit to the better infrastructure that there now is in India. It's becoming more attractive for people to come back, like the diaspora to come back. Um, but how much is there still a mindset of Indian pride, where you say like we still want India as a country to have that place in the world where we can certainly be kind of proud of what we've achieved. How much does that play in your generation at the moment?
Hmm, that's a very interesting question because whenever any question gets asked to a typical Indian like us, we get confused because there are like 1.4 billion people. So you can't represent whatever you say for the majority of the population. But for if you are in a particular city and you are in the tech space or are you in the VC landscape as well, so that is a very very tiny drop in the ocean, right? If you were to fragment that into three or four SECs, which is like socio-economic classes. The first SEC is where top-notch 50 to 100 million people of the 1.4 billion people reside in. They have access to the top-notch facilities across the country and across the world as well. They have good educational credentials because they were lucky enough to go to some of the best schools and universities, and they are very global in nature. They have been to different parts of the world. They have working experience. They have worked in different industries. So they are
Oh no, did we lose him?
Yeah, that, I think we have an electric break coming up in the podcast. Of
I
course, in the
yeah,
live version, in
I
the live
think
version, we will continue, but we will edit this up for the audio version, I think.
I think the lights went out.
Yeah,
Let me check up on him while
yeah.
you
So while we
keep it
talk
going.
about it, we'll just go through a couple of comments, because Devin and Gregory are sharing some knowledge and keep us going. So Modef says surround your Elon Musk said surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. You know, it's an interesting case, because you don't always want that, Devin. So that's the difficult part. You don't always want to be only with, because like as was said, you have different kind of smarts. You have everybody is a smart person. Everybody just in their own perspective field. So today, Diego and I were with a group of people, and one of my friends came a little bit late, and he has a very distinctive quality. He has a quality that when he moves into a room or into a table, it becomes fun. It doesn't matter what the setting is. It doesn't matter what we're talking about. But if he enters the room or he joins the conversation is fun. We have a lot of laughs, and it's not just because he is that good in conversing, but it's more that he gets other people going and makes other people feel comfortable. So it isn't always like, I understand that the quote from Elon was very much from a business strategic perspective, but it's not always the case that you want that necessarily. You do want it because you want to grow as a company, but not necessarily makes it the environment you want to be in. So, Diego, while we wait, uh, do you specifically want to do agree disagree?
Can you repeat the what are we agreeing and disagreeing about?
Okay, so I'm just gonna share it here. The higher you climb up the ladder, the more you need to prioritize soft skills over hard skills. Example: managing people, empathy, delegation. Phew, I find this a difficult one.
So did this? Okay, I assume Gregory is asking this from a more traditional corporate frame. Because if we're talking about a ladder, we're talking about a bigger organization. That's where a lot of layers and managing come into play. So in that case, I'd say yes. The more people skills, communication skills you have, that comes more into play, becomes more prevalent as you go higher because you have more responsibilities. But if you're talking about the startup phase, as we mentioned before, you have smaller teams. This is where everybody actually needs to have these skills and co-contribute to everything because everyone has more stake in what the outcome is. Everyone has more responsibility. So in that sense, you are actually on an equal ladder on a flat surface, and that's where you actually also need empathy, delegation, and actually trust in that others will actually execute in what they are best at. So in that aspect, I won't say the higher not only the high, it doesn't necessarily count to just how higher you go that you need soft skills. So it depends on the context and environment, and this can go into the the, the nurture. And I see Saswat is back.
Yes, Saswat back. So before we bring Saswat back, Gregory, I'm gonna go a very Gary Vaynerchuk on you. Clouds and dirt, clouds and dirt. Like a lot of people focus on the soft skills, but then they really don't know anything about the hard skills anymore, and they completely get disconnected from their whole team. So it's cloud and dirt, baby. You have to be like in the clouds to understand the bigger picture, and you also have to go into the dirt to touch up your skills. Because if you lose your hard skills and you have a team of 20 people that actually you have to manage, and they realize that you don't actually have those hard skills that you try to judge them on, oh, they're just gonna have a field day with you, and you won't even know they're having a field day with you. So let's bring back Saswat. So what you can tell us. I mean, we're open and authentic. So you on our
Yeah.
show, so you can just tell us what happened.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. So
yeah,
what happened is that there was a
yeah,
little bit of blip, and whenever there is a blip for like 5 seconds, the electricity just goes off. So it just went off, and then it got connected. So usually the it's like 6 o'clock in the morning, I think so. Yeah.
yeah.
So there's a little bit of electricity change as well. So sorry for that disconnection at my end, guys. But
It's
yeah,
fine. It's fine.
No worries,
So
we've
so
yeah,
experienced it several times
yeah,
here.
I mean, we had several experiences. We have hotspotted. I think one of the first episodes, my internet was like so terrible that I had to hotspot to my phone, and I kept getting out of the thing. So what we're gonna do for the live session, we're just gonna continue for the audio
sure,
version of the podcast. We're gonna do some cuts, but maybe
sure.
a little bit go back on the question, because what I loved is how you kind of structured everything, and you were kind of telling us about the three different layers. So if we
Sure.
can quickly go a little bit back to those three different layers, and also connecting that to like the nationalist side of Indian pride, especially from
Sure.
your generation.
Sure. So I was talking about the socioeconomic classes of like the first 50 or 100 million people. Then there is a huge middle class. The way we structure that middle class is that maybe around like 600 or 700 million people are in that middle class zone, which is like taking away another leaving another 600 million people as well, and the 600 people are in the lower middle class or in the lowest of the spectrum, right? So whenever you folks are talking to educated people, people who have well traveled, have been to different universities across the globe, or you see them in many of the newspapers, or you hear about them in all the global platforms, you possibly are touching the 50 to 100 million people, right? So of course there are brilliant folks in the rest of the spectrum as well, but the majority of the people who are taking the PR coverage is in that top layer. Now the worldview of those people are, they have a global exposure. They are much more comfortable working with people from all cultures. They have better experiences in their life due to their privilege or due to their educational backgrounds as well. So their worldview is very different. It is nice. The world is rosy. It's a rosy picture for them. They have access to the best of the things in different parts of the world. They have friends all across the world, so that's a different spectrum. The middle class people are the folks where they are the first generation of folks who have actually taken from from their parents. The parents were not very well off, but because of their hardworking skills, they've really uh, jumped the chasm or gone beyond the barrier of being in their previous generation of how do you say, to put in humbler tone, not from very rich backgrounds, right? Now, that majority of the middle class that you actually talk about, that's also famously called as the Indian middle class. And they have people who have really struggled very hard for a good amount of time, maybe 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years as well. These are the people who are really supporting all the social construct within India, right? Uh, and there is a majority of the segment, maybe I may be butchering the numbers, but maybe 400 million or 500 million who are in the lower spectrum. They do not have access to the best of the facilities, whether it is access to educational institutions in India or abroad, or access to a lot of other societal features as well. Now, the reason I deconstructed that into three layers is because whenever you ask about India, it is not a singular answer. It is dependent on which spectrum of people you are referring to or you are asking about as well, because each one's worldview is very complex and very different, right? Um, but if you were to generalize some of the elements for all these three sectors or spectrums, would be one of them is that for the last 20 years, India has developed and has become one of the amazing, it's still ranging in the top 10 economies of the world. So if you were to think that globally we are doing really good, maybe it's like $2.7 trillion of GDP, going towards more, maybe $5 trillion of GDP in the next 2 to 3 years. So the global components are looking good, but that accounts for almost like 1.4 billion people, right? So that's why the numbers are really going big. But if you individually cater to these segments, the middle class people as well as the upper middle class or the rich segment, or the top of the band folks, have the best of the facilities. They are much more gung ho about the Indian wave as well. The way our governments have been performing, the way the global arena has respected the Indian talent from various educational backgrounds, the way the Indian talent has been performing in different parts of the world, and the way they have been performing within that country as well, has been absolutely fabulous, right? So there's a winning story in place. If you were to take note of the lowest spectrum of, let's say, 400 or 500 people, there's a lot of development that could be done. So a lot of institutions, whether it is government or a bunch of private institutions, are really looking to cater to this 500 people, as 500 million people as well. So there is an inside joke in the startup ecosystem where they have actually layered into two segments. One is that India 1 and India 2. So India 1 has this access to all the best of the things. They have a different worldview altogether. And India 2, which is still on the verge of taking that leap and coming to the area of India 1 as well. So all in all, the India, I mean, I'm not a I'm very global in my mindset. So I'm not like a lot of people will say they have a national pride, but national pride is a contested topic, because just because you was born within the peripheries of a country does not make you a person who has to be obliged to do a set of things, right? You can have still have your independent opinion about a bunch of things, irrespective of which nationality you belong to or which geographical boundaries you are currently residing in. So, so definitely, because the global arena has been respecting the work of a lot of Indians and Indian institutions, that's really bringing in a little bit of pride among Indians. But definitely, I'm not pretty sure what the other 400 or 450 million Indians have the contextual knowledge about the perception of India in the outer world as well.
That
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 that was an
breakdown was
amazing background.
beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
no,
was a
I agree. Gregory says the same thing. Uh, Wait, where is it? Yeah, here it is. Yeah, you're really good into breaking down questions. So with that breakdown in mind, actually, I want to tie this into scaling and the SaaS world. And we look at India, 1.4 billion, and then if you look at Suriname, not even yeah, not even a million. So we're talking hundreds to hundred times the size in scale, and you clearly said you can't segment in India in as one whole because the GDP doesn't account for everything as a whole. So if you're looking at that at scale, and if you draw a parallel to software startup ecosystem,
Mhm.
do you need to internationalize your product or your software as a service to be able to have a successful startup business in your
Mm.
experience?
Mm. Oh, I love that topic. Thanks for asking that, Diego. That's my sweet spot as well, because I am a very strong proponent of internationalizing a lot of the software products very early on in the journeys of the software products as well. So SaaS is a global play, irrespective of which company you are operating from. You will have to sell into markets, whether it is in LATAM, whether it is in US or Europe or APAC, etc. Right? So if you have already ingrained the components of internationalization, then definitely you will have an upper edge at a later point in time. So now luckily, I was reading a particular book, which is just there by my bookshelf. It's called as Elad Gil's High Growth Handbook. And what he talks about is that whenever you are building software products, you'll have to understand what your product is, what kind of problems your product is solving, and if these problems are really in different geographies or are in global markets, then you better have to have that foundational block set up in the early stages itself. Now, when you talk about global markets, definitely language plays a role. There are a lot of other cultural nuances that comes into play. Let's say, today, if I'm a company based out of Singapore or Bangalore, and I'm trying to sell it into Suriname, maybe I happen to go to Paramaribo and try to meet some of your business partners. And how do I approach that particular problem statement? Because I don't speak Dutch. I don't know how to engage with a lot of. There's a high possibility that a lot of people from, let's say, from this part of the world haven't even met a lot of Surinamese people. So how do they sell into those kind of markets, right? So One is that you'll have to have a very strong understanding about the new market, or about the international market that you're trying to sell into. That's one. Secondly, you'll have to have a very strong understanding about the cultural elements of a particular country, whether it has food cues, whether it has language cues, whether it has a lot of other traditional practices, etc. And thereafter you'll have to make the messaging or the communication strategy accordingly for the GTM, which is the go to market. And the more understanding you are about a particular user's problem in a particular segment or a particular market, the better you can actually modulate the product for their conditioning, because people eventually buy, right? Whether it is a B2C or a B2B, irrespective of which country you are trying to target, you are selling into people. And as long as you solve people's problem, your product gets solved, gets sold out, or gets perceived well within that particular market, and eventually you get the revenues into your company. So SaaS is the one of the amazing business model for software products, because you can be having your development team or implementation team in your particular country, and eventually you can sell it to any of the countries in the world. There's a high possibility that if you are having your implementation team in Suriname, you can still sell it to, let's say, Eastern Europe. You can still sell it to, Germany. You can still sell it to Australia, etc. So internationalization is definitely the way to go, because it's a very flat world we are in, right? I mean, irrespective of which country we all are living in, we are all using some of the base. We are all using the internet, which is truly global in nature, right? It started off with nine.
Luckily,
Uh,
luckily.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. There's a new wave coming in as
Yeah.
well. But it's global in nature, and we are using some of the same. We are using the same search engines, whether it is Google.com, etc. We are trying to have access, especially to the same OTT platforms, whether it is Amazon, Netflix, etc. So there's a lot of standardization, or people are getting into the same realm of things. Yeah,
I want to
David.
go into that a bit. Sorry to interrupt, because there, as you say, there's becoming standardization. More people are adopting some solutions everywhere, independent of geography, has the same subset of problems, common problems. Other places, more niche problems, of course, depending on geographic, political, business, economic situations. But don't you think at a point there's going to be a saturation of SaaS solutions, of copy paste products of each other?
It's not
And
already there, but the market solves itself, I think. Sorry
yeah,
for
so
just jumping in.
how
Yeah.
does that solve itself? Is my question then. Um, because yeah, you mentioned you have to internationalize, and basically then you have to localize again. So you go
Sure.
local, international, localize to solve the specific problem there. Um, but how does that work itself out from your experience?
So glocalization is a new terminology. I mean, it has been there for at least a decade, where every global company that has a global mindset wants to localize it in a specific country, right? But your question was that how do you, if everyone copy paste, right? Then how do you go further? So I strongly believe that a particular set of people, if they happen to reside in a particular geographical location or in a country, they have strong skill sets, right? So if you go to the Wall Street area, like one of the gentlemen from your show was talking about, in the finance realm, some of the best bankers in the world are in the Wall Street, are in the US, right? So the financial system is somehow being concentrated, if we were to say, in the US. Similarly, software has been a good powerhouse for India for almost like 3 decades. It started from early 1980s, and thereafter there was a lot of outsourcing work that happened to come to India, and eventually now Indian companies are coming towards the productization or SaaSification of software products, right? So there will be world-class software products that will be built out from this part of the world, which will be catering to the global ecosystem. And to answer your question, Diego, is there a possibility of replication of these software products in different geographies as well? So if somewhere gets started in, let's say, Singapore, Thailand, India, is there a possibility it can be replicated in Ukraine, or let's say Romania, or in Germany, and then thereafter somewhere in Latin America as well? My thought process is that it can be replicated definitely, and it should be replicated as well, as long as you are delivering the best services or the product to your consumers or customers. And if you can make any product faster, cheaper, and much more relevant to your consumers, then the best it is. But but as we will touch upon a Silicon Valley mindset, where some of the fundamentals of software development are really at the top of the pyramid, right? I mean, they know the skills by which they can really globalize products which have strong moats that cannot be replicated even if you want to in your respective geographies, right? I mean, for every Uber there has been a taxi service in every other country, in India included as well. We have Ola. But can you actually level up to the systemic thinking of the folks out there in Uber who are trying to globalize their product in different markets? It's a complex game. So
It's
countries
really
can try.
interesting.
Yeah.
So I want to jump into that because I was going to ask a question of language because of course you also worked in Mexico with companies and entrepreneurs there, but you jumped into something interesting because what of course happens, like it's a global game. A multinational comes kind of takes over the whole field. Perfect example actually is something like Netflix or Spotify.
Hmm.
Like there are massive advantages. Like I
Hmm.
think the when it comes to series, Spain was never known for movies, but thanks to Netflix, Spain is becoming like this major player when it comes to series like suspense series, especially with Casa de Papel and those kind of series.
Yeah.
So that's a very interesting, positive globalization aspect. But then you get something like Spotify, and to give a little bit of context, Spotify was not available in Suriname for very long time. So like
Mm.
until 2019, like around
No,
COVID,
it's only March this year
yeah,
that it
yeah.
officially
So
became here.
it was never available. Spotify wasn't available in Suriname. So there was actually a local kind of Spotify-like app that was built for the local community in the Caribbean. And like the reason Spotify wasn't in Suriname was Spotify looked at India and then looked at the Caribbean, and like all these countries combined added up to 50 million, and they were like, yeah, we don't really care about that target audience until globalization hit them hard and COVID hit them hard, and they were like, okay, maybe we should expand. So they kind of killed off all the competition, which wasn't that much, but now Spotify is available in Suriname and everybody can play with it, and kind of all these initiatives to kind of localize or local music or focus on regional strengthening the region, it kind of dissolved immediately. Also because it wasn't strong enough. But then I want to ask the question, like you already mentioned, Ola, and there are probably a lot of other local apps in India, which even though the multinationals can use all their resources
Hmm.
to target you and put all kinds of psychological pressure on you to keep using their product, locals stay away from it and use a different software just because that software is built more for them and they relate more to that software. How often do you come across these kind of solutions, and could you give us an example where like a local company or a local software just completely beat out like the multinationals and the bigger software companies?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, John, look, what I have realized is that somehow a lot of value-based products, especially the consumer products, they have amazing execution abilities, right? I mean, even if you talk about any of the great enterprises currently, right? The FANGs, they are all based out of the US, and they have some of the amazing teams. Now, their core teams may be based out of the US, but a lot of their work happens from different parts of the world, including some of the work that happens in Bangalore or in India per se, right? Now, the Silicon Valley mindset is very, very unique. Uh, from day zero, they have a globalization, roadmap in play, right? They make products for the world. Now, this mindset is very difficult to replicate if you do not have that framework already in place in the hub that you are operating in, right? So it takes a lot of people few years to actually understand this basic concept, that because in Silicon Valley everyone thinks big. So any product that you develop, you actually are aiming to target the entire world with that particular product, right? If I were to give a few of the examples from my ecosystem, especially the startup ecosystem started evolving for the last 11, 12 years. It started with a company called as Flipkart, which was, competing with Amazon for a good amount of years, eventually got acquired by Walmart. Ola, like we referenced earlier, is competing heavily with Uber. There's a lot of other automobile tech startups that are competing from the global peers as well, and especially in software, right? I mean, Salesforce has been the top-notch SaaS product in the world, right? Everyone knows about it. But we just had an IPO from a company called as Freshworks, which is maybe like 7, 10 years old, and they are also competing head on with Salesforce, right? I mean, there is HubSpot in the CRM space, but they're still competing. Now, the good part of this is that because they are very confident of their internal teams, they are very confident about the expertise that they bring in, and they're very, very comfortable with converging with these global lanes or global narratives as well, right? Any product that is coming up from this part of the world has a very strong sense of understanding the local markets as well. So let's say tomorrow, if Ola goes to Suriname, you'd be amazed the way they would engage with the local partners and understand the local ecosystem well before entering into that market as well. So a lot of Indian companies are there that could be given as examples, but I would actually touch upon an area that you need. Maybe I'll go deep into an area as to why this is actually happening, right? You can start your company or an enterprise or an entity from whichever country you are in. It doesn't matter whether it is Latin America, doesn't matter in this new era of decentralization, where everything is happening in the decentralized remote world. You do not have to be physically located in a particular HQ in a particular location. What you can actually bring in is the ethos of the company that really sets the bedrock for the global expansion. Once you have understood how do you actually build a international company from ground zero, then you'll be amazed that the fundamental blocks are way different, right? A, you'll have to think very big. B, capital is not more anymore a constraint if you have the right skill set, expertise, domain knowledge. You can be based out of, let's say, in Argentina, or you can be based out of, let's say, in Australia, but you can still have access to capital in any part of the world. In 2021 and beyond, physical boundaries are not a restriction anymore. So many of the SaaS companies that I've been engaging with or talking to or speaking with, I've realized that they have a very strong global play at hand in the very first 6 months, 12 months. Eventually, a lot of funding definitely comes from US, but it will evolve or skyrocket into a different trajectory in the next 2 to 5 years.
I'm quickly looking at the time, and there's a lot to unpack there. You mentioned funding from the US, decentralization, um, global mindset, and I want to cover them all, but we don't have the time.
We're
So
not even going to talk about podcasting. We're going to do a separate episode in 2022 to talk about podcasting. Let's
so
let's let's just
let's focus on
No, no,
this. And I
but John, look, you spoke about Spotify, right? So that's a good segue into podcasting.
yeah, but I feel like Diego still has at least 10 minutes of questions. We still want to do an overrated, underrated
yeah,
with you,
so I
and
would
I mean,
suggest we
yeah,
transition it into an over under format to cover some of these things that Sas was mentioned in his last, yeah, in his last answer there. And so that's what we kind of every show, every episode, we end it off with an overrated, underrated. We bring up a subject, topic, can be relevant, random, and then you give us your hot take if you think it's overrated, underrated. Of course, you can say it's also properly rated,
Hmm.
and you can also elaborate a bit if it's kind of controversial. So the first thing I wanna know from you, based on experience, underrated, overrated, venture capital, is it underrated or overrated?
I may not be the right person to answer on that, but
Personal
I think
opinion. Yeah.
personal opinion, I think overrated maybe. And the reason for that is that uh, it's a lot of PR engine that really shapes the narrative these days. So there's a lot of dollar news or money news that you keep on hearing from all digital channels. But it's a simple concept, I think. So it's definitely overrated. I mean, the good entrepreneurs definitely know the game of VC fundraising, so that's not a challenge for them. And the best of the VCs are too humble to even comment on a bunch of things, right? I mean, they're too busy in the scheme of worlds. So it's just the media that is hyping or overrating it. Is my personal opinion.
Interesting.
okay. I'm gonna try to take it from a more social media approach. So Twitter Spaces, underrated or overrated? Twitter Spaces.
Yeah, I've used it for a couple of times, but audio, social audio, right? Social audio is a bigger phenomenon, and Twitter Spaces is just plugging into one part of it. There are huge other players in the competitive space, including Clubhouse, Spotify Green Room, Facebook, etc. I think it is underrated because the potential that I see for Twitter Spaces is really humongous. Especially, I have no idea what their product roadmap is for the next 2 to 3 years, but definitely Twitter for their last 12 years of operations that I've been observing, they're sitting on a gold mine of data. They're just sitting on a gold mine of data, and the kind of people that are available on Twitter is just amazing. So what they can actually make Twitter Spaces in the next 6 to 12 months is really huge. So we are just touching the surface of it. It feels so, and Twitter is definitely giving a big competition to a lot of its peers in the coming months. Is what I feel so. So definitely underrated at this point in time.
Interesting.
All right. Next one for me, from a from a business perspective, Singapore. Is it
Mhm.
underrated or overrated?
No, I don't think Singapore is underrated or overrated. It is rightly rated, and it's the narrative of Singapore is at the right stage. Is what I feel so. Maybe 10 years back, it could be a hype or maybe overrated, but right now it is it's in the same plane.
Okay, I'm gonna throw a little bit of a weird one, but content ownership, that you own your own content instead of the platform.
You are asking that to a creator, right? We are all creators. Podcasters are creators. So I think content ownership, that's a very deep and complex topic, John. The definition of
I'll tell
content.
you, yeah, I'll tell a little bit, give a little bit of maybe a little bit of an introduction to that question. Like, I'm not a tech person, so when I started off with podcasting, I used Anchor,
Hmm.
and there are a lot of discussions now on the pros and the cons of Anchor. One of the major major pros of Anchor at the time for me was it's automatically connected to Spotify. So if I
Yeah.
upload to Anchor, I automatically have it on Spotify,
Yeah.
which I didn't have. And at that time, again, Spotify wasn't available in Suriname. So Spotify for creators wasn't either. So
Hmm.
from that perspective, it was just on a click of a button, and then but then on the other side, when you want to switch, like it's there. It's I wouldn't say it's fully owned by them, but still they you kind of sign off that they can do stuff with it. Same goes for Facebook. So when it comes to content ownership, like most of us are like just we want to put out content. We don't really think of how important it is that
Hmm.
we sign off on Facebook using a picture that we uploaded as part of their marketing or advertising
Hmm.
strategy. So it comes to a point like how important is it to own your own data, own your own podcast that somebody else doesn't profit from it without you kind of knowing about it.
Got it. Got it. So if you, so I understand your question. So the answer would be overrated, but because there's a lot of depth into it. I'm a mentor with Anchor, Spotify Anchor's podcast lab out here in India, which means that we have taken 200 early stage podcasters and we are coaching them to create their season one. So I know for sure that Anchor, in their bylaws, they it's a good platform to start off with. You can post your particular podcast, and they've categorically said that the content is owned by the creator himself or herself, right? So they would not take the content ownership, but definitely you are using their platform to launch into Spotify and a bunch of other distribution platforms as well. So the content is still yours. What it will happen after 5 years, I may not be the right person to comment on it. But as we speak in 2021, definitely, if you are using Anchor, the content is definitely yours. But on touching on the broader, segment of platforms that are using your content, and you are voluntarily putting your content for the distribution for your access to multiple users, etc. You are anyways giving a little bit of your independence to these platforms, right? Because if 100% of independence is the pie, then definitely by just using a particular platform like Facebook, Twitter, Clubhouse, Anchor, Spotify, whatsoever, even if they don't say it in their user long agreements, you still are giving a little bit of your independence to them, because your content is on their platform. So you have no idea what may be churning in the back of the boardroom as well. I mean, the latest fiasco of Facebook, right, was a big eye opener. A lot of ocean analysis that was done on personality types of people was done without the consent of a lot of the content creators as well. So that's a platform game. Any platform that has your data definitely has the capability to mine, slice and dice the data and do a bunch of things, and eventually they can thrust a bunch of bylaws on you at a later point in time when their business model is at risk. So at this point in time, I think any content creator should be aware that if you are putting your content in any of the platforms in the digital ecosystem, you are anyways giving away a little bit of your independence. So you have the right to privacy. You can still post your content via postal mails to your friends, but if you do not do so, then definitely you are giving away a little bit of your independence every time you are accessing a new platform.
So was that overrated? Am I right? You,
It's overrated from my perspective, because if you are an intelligent content creator, you are already aware of these
yeah, you
basics
can
from day
navigate
one.
the space. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. On the topic of ownership and decentralization, when we were at the fellowship in February, March, NFTs were all the hype. And
Yes.
kind of, the market cycle has been gone up, gone down. And at this point in time, are NFTs, in your opinion, overrated or underrated?
Underrated. Definitely. Why? Because the
Still,
use cases
okay.
that yeah, the use cases that are popping up for NFTs, especially for the passion economy, the creator economy, is just humongous. I mean, a lot of people, especially people from our world of Web 2, have no idea what these things can become in the next 2 to 5 years. I mean, you referenced to Gary Vaynerchuk as well, right? So, if you just look into some of the some of the messages sent by a bunch of people in their We Friends server, you will realize that the kind of creators, the kind of worlds these creators are creating is just unimaginable. So it's not a surprise that a company like Facebook is changing its entire name into Meta in 2021. There's a bunch of other storylines to that as well, but definitely the metaverse, the NFTs are definitely going big. So at this point in time, December 2021, underrated.
Okay, because then I'm going to quickly jump back to Web 2.0, but even older, like Marketing 1.0. So my overrated, underrated is advertising as a my method of monetization. Is that overrated or underrated? So that you monetize by having companies advertise.
That's a tricky question actually, because if I as per my understanding, I understand both sides of the world. Having played the enterprise game, I know if you are a company and if you are representing a particular company, then you understand the mechanics of advertisement revenue flow as well. But if you are on the other side, when you are a creator, then you understand what's happening at the top of the line as well, right? So a good question would be: is it underrated or overrated from which side you are looking into, right? From the creator side, it is overrated. From the enterprise or company side, it is underrated.
Interesting, interesting. So a little bit on why it's underrated from the companies or enterprise side.
Yeah, because companies see, advertisement is a part of marketing, right? So every company has a marketing budget, roughly 2 to 5%. So depending on the kind of scale of the company as well. So a marketing company understands sorry, the marketing department of the company understands that there is a certain budget for ads spends as well, right? Eventually these ad spends get deployed via various channels, and eventually it lands in one of the kitties of one of the creator which is there in some part of the world, right? So from their point of view, it is underrated because they see the value the entire ad spend gives to their company. Like I mentioned, right, the marketing budget itself is like 2 to 5%. Ad budget is almost a minuscule part of that particular budget as compared to the gross revenue or net revenue of the company. So for from their part of the world, I mean, if you are a CEO of a company, you would give more value to the sales department. You will give more value to the implementation teams, to the core of the company, as opposed to the marketing company, which may be let's say 5 to 7%. And within the marketing company there is a smaller one of, let's say, 2 to 5%, which is ad company. So it's very underrated. And it's also whom you are asking this question to. It's a great question. I'm just thinking that if you are a person who understands the value economics of ad spends, ad revenues, and ad ROIs to your business entity, then you understand the entire how do you say, the cost benefit analysis that gets done, and there's a modeling that gets done on the CBI as well. So for you, it is a no brainer. But for an outside person, for a lay person who does not understand this value chain, who does not understand the CBIs, you get confused, and then you have a perception or an opinion about maybe it's an underrated or an overrated. But if you are a very analytical person, you understand the value chain, then you say it's perfectly rated.
Speaking of analytical, very analytical analysis you just did there.
I love it, but I also love the fact like the first answer was like for a creator, overrated. I love like we don't have to get into that this time
Yeah.
around, but I love how
No,
you segmented it between indeed the two perspectives, the perspective from a creator and the perspective from the company as well.
no, that was a amazing breakdown of over underrated. But I think it's time to close it off before we go another 2 3 hours. So, Saswat, to close it off, how are you closing off 2021, and where can people find you, connect with you, find your content, podcast? You can share that all now.
Sure. Thanks for giving me this opportunity, Diego and John Luke as well. Absolutely love this conversation. And yeah, I'm available on Twitter at twitter.com/Arbalestpartner. And I'm closing out 2021 by an amazing course on podcasting, which is called as Audio Lab. I co-created with a friend of mine, Ariel Nissenblatt, and we went through the Maven experience to create it on Maven. So it's just available on maven.com/Republic of SaaS/Audiolab. So it's a podcasting curriculum that we have created for upcoming podcasters or best of the podcasters in the world to become thought leaders. So we are happy to have any of the listeners or any of the folks who would love to join us in this amazing journey. So that's how we are closing out.
Was that just another blip?
Yes, yes, there was a blip. The light also said, yeah, yeah, I agree to that.
Awesome.
Awesome. So with Diego, of course, we will put in the links, all the links of Saswat just mentioned into the description of the video, but also the audio version. Diego, some final closing remarks.
Uh, yeah, closing remarks. We are 2 weeks away from closing off the year. It has been amazing. The conversation with you, Saswat, has been very, very pleasant. The way you broke down the questions and answered, it was very like a breath of fresh air, like breaking down these complex situations that sometimes we try to, emulate. And you did really well. And I think a lot of the listeners, especially Gregory, he had the most questions. I think it got through.
Hi to
Um,
Gregory.
yeah, and yeah, there's so much more to talk about. We didn't even touch the future of audio and what the potential is there. So we would love to have you on again somewhere next year, in the middle if you are available, of course. But yeah, to the listeners who tuned in live, thank you for tuning in live. Thanks for listening. And if you missed this, you can always rewatch it or wait for you know uh, the edited, cut down version of this that will be released on the website at confoes.com. With that being said, Jean-Luc, roll us out.
Saswat, thank you so much for joining in. Diego, as always, it's been a pleasure. And everybody watching live in the comments, thank you for joining in again. This was Social Confoes. See you back next week, same place, same time. Bye bye.
Bye.